Nice to see you guys. Tonight we are just going to look at the armies for the next round of Winner's Days On. So we can see that Dwalin and Thorin the Young, that we now have the right model for Thorin the Young. It's under paint, so we're using the more aged version at the moment as a proxy. So we've got this army here. This is the most successful army we have at the moment. How many times has it won, George?
Twice now.
Twice now. So if it wins this one, it goes into the all-time winner 3 times. Nobody else has won that many times.
No one's won twice yet.
That's true. Well, absolutely. So my English is good there. But we're now trying to find, because we're trying to maintain a good v evil theme throughout this. So we have Goblin Town with a good old Goblin King. So this is going to be a different game. Clearly, the Goblin King in himself is a beast. We've got the Scribe, because why wouldn't you? We want lots and lots of models on to try and swarm the dwarfs, and we're going to have a game of attrition. Now we're looking at the 6 main scenarios, and how these 2 armies would compare on those scenarios, because what is very true in Lord of the Rings and what we quite like is that you can have a fantastic army, but if the wrong scenario comes up, you're going to struggle, and that's what gives it balance. That's what gives it so much fun. So typically, if Reconnoiter came up with the 44 models that the Goblin Town have against the how many models for the dwarfs, George?
24.
So that's quite a comfortable margin, isn't it? So on Reconnoiter, normally the Horde will win, and that would see arguably the stronger fighting army lose, because tactically the bigger army can get more troops off the other side and should have an advantage there. So if we were looking at a different battle, such as domination, again the Horde army could have an advantage, because there are in domination, for those of you that don't know, there are 5 objectives, and you get points for being at each of the objective, and they're at least 10 to 12 inches apart. So again, with those with more troops, even with the broken and taken morale checks, a Goblin Town army could do quite well if it can get a number of figures at the objective points, even if it is broken. So that becomes quite an interesting challenge.
In domination, though, because the goblins are such a low courage, the chances are there would have to be 3 models in each detachment to get all of the objectives, which seriously limits their fighting power.
Just focus on the Scribe for the minute. Now the Scribe has a very interesting rule.
Oh, we're doing that now. And
but in looking at domination and reconnoiter, why is that such a good rule? Is because every turn he takes a courage test, and to pass it he needs a 7. And if he does get a 7, D3 more goblins come on. Now they don't count towards the calculation of the break value. They actually can be a liability, because it can be easy to get to the break value. But he also gets, for every roll above 7. So if he was to roll a 12 and then a D3, a 6 on a D3, he could bring out 8 models in a turn. And even if Goblin Town was broken, he could swamp some of the objective points, and even if he lost some of the morale checks, he should have a greater chance of having some left on those objective markers. So there is an interesting tactic that the goblins can use. So we were saying, and how would you in domination counter the Scribe?
In domination, quite easy. I'd ignore him.
You'd ignore him. You wouldn't worry about all the extra troops coming on.
No, I'd break you, and then all the extra troops would have to take courage tests. And what I'd then do is I'd kill the Scribe, and then I'd kill all the other goblins.
Now, to the death, you would argue that the Dwarfen army has an advantage, because you score points for wounds on the enemy leader. Okay, Goblin King is quite tough, but then again so is Thorin. But the bulk of the points are coming from breaking the enemy force. And I would argue that the squishy goblins could break more easily than the tougher dwarves. Both armies, neither army has an official banner, so in To the Death you would get 1 or 2 points for having a banner, and then you would get points for breaking the enemy force. So I would argue that the goblins still have a good go at To the Death, but clearly I would imagine the stronger dwarfs would do better in that one.
Especially considering I could 25% you by just killing the people you constantly bring on with the scribe.
Well, that's where the scribe becomes a bit of a liability. But nevertheless, if I'm getting 4 rolls on you every turn, it should compensate for your higher fight.
Yeah, I do a lot of shielding where I'm very vulnerable and kill where I've got my heroes. And that would be the entire game probably. Heroes killing, everyone else just don't break.
And we just hope the Goblin King gets in there and does a bit of damage. Interesting. Lords of Battle. Well, this one is where you just keep a tally on the number of models you kill. This again would be in the favour of the dwarfs because there are more bodies that they can kill with a Goblin Town, especially with a scribe, than the other way around. So the other two scenarios are hold ground. Well, hold ground comes back to support the more numerous army again. So Goblin Town could do quite well on hold ground, especially if it can get to the centre. But we've played hold ground a couple of times, so we're unlikely to do that. But that would be an interesting one. So the scenarios so far are quite interesting in the way that the two armies, depending on what comes up, could actually have an advantage or disadvantage in each of the scenarios. But the one we've left till last is Heirlooms of Ages Past, and we'll talk about that for a few minutes. And that is the one that we've rolled, and actually we have already deployed the objective markers, which George will show you. Not yet. Thank you. So this one is one of my favourites. Without a shadow of doubt, the guy who holds the heirloom, the prize, is more than likely going to win this scenario. But there are 6 potential places where that prize can be. But let's just look through where the victory points. 6 victory points if your force is in possession of the relic at the end of the game. However, if at the end of the game you're not in possession of the relic but have more models within 3 inches of the relic, then you will score 3 victory points. So having possession, 6 victory points is 50% of the total points you can score in the scenario. So that's a big advantage. And you're bound to score some of the other points, I would have imagined. So 1 victory point for causing a wound on the enemy leader, 2 for killing the enemy leader, 1 if the enemy force is broken, 2 if the enemy force is broken and you're not broken, and 1 victory point if at least 1 banner remained at the end of the game and your opponent has none, then you score 2 victory points. So the banners are red herring in this particular case, unless of course the heroes count as banners. But I don't think that's the case in this one, is it?
No, heroes. Even if they count as banners, they don't get banner victory points.
Now the other thing I like about heirlooms is this again where you come on. Warbands come on from anywhere on the table edge. So on a 1, the warband does not arrive. On a 2, you come on north or south, dependent on your opponent's choice. On a 3, east or west, your opponent chooses. So 1, 2 or 3 low scores are not very good for yourself. They're good for your opponent. And then it flips. 4, you choose north and south. 5, your opponent. You choose east or west. And a 6, you come on anywhere where you want. And I quite like these because if you get warbands coming on next to each other, enemy warbands coming on next to each other, which can often happen, then you get a bit of a fight at that point. And that can play quite a big part of any strategy. So let's just have a look. So George is going to show you the table and is going to show you where the heirlooms are in this particular case. And so how do you determine whether you've found an heirloom? Well, quite simply, you talk onto the heirloom and you roll a dice. If you roll a 6, it's the heirloom. If at the end of the game 5 heirlooms have been rolled for and none of them are heirlooms, then the last one remaining is automatically the heirloom. And often a strategy, if both sides have an heirloom have a treasure point in their possession, and they're the only two left, quite often they will not roll a dice. They'd rather score points on the other aspects of scoring points in the scenario, because to roll and to lose would give your opponent the game. So strategically, holding on to treasure points can be quite important, especially if your opponent whittles away by rolling and then losing the prize because it's not a 6.
An interesting tactic, if you're both not going to roll for your one, is to send maybe a couple of guys round to try and roll on their heirloom, because the chances of you getting a 6 are 1 in 6.
18%.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's more 19%.
Okay, near enough. So
No, it's not. It is 18%.
thank you. Rounded up. We're 17 something rounded up, but let's not get into that sad world. All right, George, put your calculator away. So anyway, let's have a quick look at the armies, and then you can have a look to see what's going to happen. So the dwarves have got 2 warbands. So what have you got in your 2 warbands, George?
Well, the reigning champions, as they forever shall be known, because they will never lose a battle. Trust.
I think you're going to lose one tonight.
I don't think so. They're led by young Thorin, as always. He's got the Oaken Shield, although not on the actual model here, but he does, trust me. And he's leading his standard warband of 5 warriors of Erebor with shield, 6 warriors of Erebor with shield and spear, and a Grimhammer.
The Grimhammer.
Yeah, who has so far killed a total of 0 people with his Thorin daggers.
But he's a Grimhammer.
Leading the other warband is young Dwalin, as you see here. And his warband consists, as always, of 5 warriors of Erebor with shield, and 5 warriors of Erebor with shield and spear. Now, the main bonus of this army is that they will have very, very high defense, with defense 7 across the board, with 2 models defense 6. That is young Dwalin and Mr. Grimhammer here.
The Grimhammer.
Yeah, they're a little bit squishy. But to make up for the fact...
Squishy. Do you know what my defense is?
Shut up. But to make up for the fact that the rest of to make up for the 2 defense 6s, we have young Thorin here, who is defense 8 with the Oaken Shield, making him what is known as a tank. So I'd like to just explain the benefits of my army.
There we are.
Defense. That's it. Also, the higher fight. But I'm against goblins, so the fight 4 doesn't really matter. But it's fine. I could, if I wanted to, pierce and strike when I'm confident in winning a fight. Am I going to do this against the goblins? Probably not. Mostly because I don't think I'm ever going to be confident I'm going to win a fight. That's only when I outnumber people.
Okay, so let's have a look at the goblins.
No, I'm not done yet.
Oh, sorry.
No, of course not.
I was falling asleep there.
I fell asleep 3 times during your ramble.
What's
your point?
Crack on. Crack on.
The obvious weakness of my army is, of course, there's only 24 of them. They're a niche little group. Of course, the other benefit of them is their 2 heroes kick backside, because they're just good. And that's my army. Moving on to the goblins.
So, tactically, when you're on a search for treasure, having 4 warbands has got to be better than 2, because that's a 100% increase in the chances of finding treasure. Now, the Goblin King, he is an absolutely beast in the game. What I like most about him, and has been proven a number of times, is you can wound him, but he has what's called blubbery mass. If he rolls a 3 up, it doesn't count. And I'm sure that that's going to play dividends in this particular game. We have Grinner, who's one of the few named captains in Goblin Town. I'm not sure the Goblin Scribe counts as named, but he has a little bit of a whip or a scourge, which a range of 2 inches, strength of 2. It's not really going to do a lot, but it's a bit of fun. But he also has a swap with me rule. So he has a heroic action that he can use at the start of any phase. So should he be surrounded by dwarfs, he can just swap with a friendly goblin within 3 inches. And that can be a nice little save. But of course, that counts as a might point. It's only got 3 might, so you can only do it a number of times. But that is quite useful. The Goblin Scribe was talked about. He's immobile. He counts as a heavy obstacle, so he needs a couple of guys to shove him around. So we'll just put them there. They will manoeuvre him around. Obviously, he wants to be as far away from the enemy as possible. He's only there to issue morale checks to get more and more goblins on, which could be quite useful in this particular game. So 4 warbands. The Moria goblins that we're using, it's just that some of the I had 3 points left, so I can make 3 of my goblins two-handed, and so it was easier to identify them. I just used 3 Moria goblins. They're basically Goblin Town goblins that have two-handed weapons. So that is my army, and what we'll do now is we'll get ready for deployment.
Goodbye.